particular. Like, what is the purpose? What am I trying to do? Who are giving you keys, giving you gems, creating pipelines to access, talking to influential people, icons, about how they've done it, and sharing the tips so that you can enter into that space. One thing that I do know about marginalized communities is that the pipeline to access is often limited. Now, if you cleaned up on Saturday mornings and your parents played old school music, then this show is for you. Because welcome everyone. You're now tuned into another amazing edition of Sanya on Air. I'm your host, Sanya Hudson, and this is an intentional show where we unpack celebrity pivotal moments and their milestones while providing pipelines to access so that you can have opportunities just like the celebrities that I interview. So do me a quick favor. Before we jump into this all-star celebrity interview and I tell you about today's guest, do me a favor. Make sure that you subscribe, like, share, and leave a comment. Once again, make sure you subscribe, like, share, and leave a comment. It's so important, especially for a content creator who is a woman of color of a particular age. It is so important to have your support. So for every like, for every subscribe, for every share, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Let me tell you about today's guest. I'm excited. I'm always excited about every single guest. Today's guest is a New York Times best-selling author. He is known for, let me just say, it's two words, the name of one of his novels, Flyy Girl. If you are a Flyy Girl of a particular age like myself, you know who this author is, none other than Omar Tyree. So we read all of his books throughout the 90s, the early 2000s, but guess what? There's an evolution of Flyy Girl. And I think that we all need to be reminded of the fabulosity of the era. The 90s was such an era. It was framed in sexuality, fashion, music, toxicity, but we made it through. We definitely made it through. When you ask anybody about their most favorite era, the 90s is definitely it. The 90s is just a word. The 90s is an adjective. The 90s is an adjective. It describes everything. So we're going to be talking to Omar Tyree about the evolution of his best-selling novel, Flyy Girl, but we're also going to be talking about so many other things. Some of the things that I really want to talk about is the capacity and the courage to pivot. A lot of people get scared, intimidated when they have to make a change. And this is a milestone that every single person will face, young and old. How do you pivot? How do you ignore or bypass the anxiety in order to get to the next step? We're also going to be talking about how did he sign to a major publishing company the first time around. The first time around signing to a major company, major publishing company. So there are so many aspiring authors that are going to be tuning in to this episode. So this is going to be a gem for you. Pipelines to access. We're also going to be talking about his writing process and some of the challenges that he's faced. I don't know if some of you know, but I'm also a published author. I've written a few books. Make sure that you go check it out. It's all under Sanya Hudson. The name of my first book was called The Seasons of Love. And the second book is called A Love I Can Trust. And I'm also a contributing writer to many magazine articles, other novels. So I'm an author too. So it is going to be a pure joy chatting it up with Omar Tyree. We're also going to be dispelling some myths, some things that just aren't true. So if you are an aspiring author, or if you really respect the genre of writing and the career of being an author, you want to know what's fact, what's fiction, so that you can take your career to the next level. And then we're really going to be talking about the evolution of Flyy Girl. You're going to be so happy that this book has been reimagined. Same story, all new look, but we're going to be talking about it all. So just make sure that you stay tuned to the duration of this Sanya on Air All Star Celebrity interview. And do me a favor, once again, make sure you subscribe, like, share, and leave a comment. Okay. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you hit the notification bell. That way, every time I upload an all new Sanya on Air celebrity interview, you'll be the first ones to know. So before I bring in Omar Tyree, I'm just going to go for a quick commercial break for our show's sponsor. And make sure you support this sponsor as well, because she is a Black owned business. And once again, in this space where so many things are being dismantled because of the color of the skin, it is super, super important that we keep brands of excellence alive and well and thriving. So lean into this commercial break. Afterwards, make sure that you go to the website, throw it in the bag, shop, purchase, keep Black business in business. I'll be right back with Omar Tyree. Stay tuned. Eden's T-Shirts and More LLC is a proud Sunny on Air sponsor. Get your customized tumblers, mugs, T-shirts, hoodies, and passport holders for all of my fabulous Sunny on Air international travelers. But let's talk about these passport holders for a moment. Travel in style with a custom passport holder. This elegant holder not only protects your passport, but also personalizes it with space for up to 4 photos. So make sure you shop Eden's T-Shirts and More LLC today. Now back to Sanya on Air. I have so many things that I want to discuss and unpack with you. Now, the purpose of this show is I unpack pivotal milestones and provide pipelines to access. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the capacity and the audacity to pivot. Now, early on in your career, you thought that you would become a pharmacist, but then it quickly pivoted to becoming an author. What made you pivot careers?
I actually wanted to play football. You didn't have no major called football, but when I went to the University of Pittsburgh, my all intentions was to walk on a football team. I was already on a track team, and that year the NFL had a strike, 1987, and so all the players, it was on strike, and then they
Mhm.
started filling out teams with scab players, guys that they was grabbing off the street, guys on the practice squad. And so we had like 3 college guys from Pitt that left school early to join these scab teams for the NFL. And then our daggone coach became like the most vocal coach, and everybody wants to go pro. That's what your whole dreams is. So
Yes.
when that whole thing went down, I kind of got turned off from college sports because I understood how they was using and abusing, the athletes. And you may not get everything you want to get out of it, but they get what they want to get out of it as the college. So, that pivot thing, I wanted to play football, but you have to declare a major. And my mother was a pharmacist, so I declared, what I was used to, seeing my
Mm,
mother with pharmacy, and I was good in math and science. So that's how that ended up happening with that pivot.
I understand. Similar to now, you wanted to become a football player. My
Yeah,
early career aspirations was to become a Dallas Cowboy cheerleader.
yeah.
As you can see,
Dallas Cowboy cheerleader.
yes, it was just something captivating about those cheerleaders. I just loved it. You couldn't tell me that I wasn't going to be a Dallas Cowboy cheerleader. So what I'm hearing is you leaned in. You wanted to figure out what was going on in the career of football and realized that that wasn't for you because they were kind of using their players, and you realized that you didn't want to be used. So you said, this isn't the career for me. Was it kind of difficult to pivot? Because a lot of people are scared to pivot. Was it difficult for you?
Well, I mean, football is a dream. You know what I mean? Like you're in school where you can study stuff that's not dreams. You know what I mean? But getting on a football team and getting a chance to really play and shine to the point where you can get to the NFL, that's still a dream. I was there, but getting to the next level. But in classrooms, I had good grades in classrooms. I knew what I was doing. So, it's not a dream there. So the pivot is easy. It's like I already know how to do math and science. I know that. Getting on a football team and getting on the field and getting big plays, I can't control that. but I can control what I'm doing in class. So it wasn't something scary at all. It's just something I already did. You know, when you're trying to be an athlete, you know that's extra, but you're already in school studying stuff. So I just finished what I was already there studying. But the whole writing thing, you know, we had writing assignments and stuff and writing courses. And so once I really understood that I was a standout in that as storytelling, which I was
Mm.
doing verbally at first, and then you start doing written when they ask you to write it down. You know, so once I understood how, you know, good of a storyteller I was, and other, you know, kids would get me to help them with their English homework and stuff, I said, hey man, this is something serious here. Let me keep rocking and rolling with it. So I pivoted to pharmacy, but then the pivot went to writing because that was a new passion that I found out I could do. Now I could already do it verbally, but writing it down, that's when it went to the next level.
Got it. Got it. Now, you also mentioned a couple of gems. You know, your mom was a pharmacist. And oftentimes, people and experiences kind of shape the evolution from a child to a young adult or an adult. Who were some of the people who influenced you? Now, before you answer that, I just want to kind of give some of my influences, and it just so happens that they're authors as well. For example, Terry McMillan. She helped
Yeah,
me realize how to navigate sisterhood and relationships.
yeah.
Elin Harris, he was the first author that really explored the down low life. And then also you, Mr. Omar Tyree. As a young girl growing up in Brooklyn, New York, it was the first time that I saw myself and my friends captured in a book called Flyy Girl.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first time that I, as a young girl growing up in the project, saw myself in a book.
Uh-huh.
So I just shared who some of my literary influences are. Who influenced you? And they don't have to be authors, but who are some of the people who influenced you?
That's a great question. I didn't have any influences on the writing level. I wasn't reading books. I was out there in the streets with guys in Philadelphia. You know what I mean? It was the 1980s. We going to parties, we break dancing, you hip hop, we going to the mall, we going to the movies. I played football. So I played football my whole life until the college years. So I'm practicing playing football. I wasn't reading books. I wasn't, on the reading side until college. So with me, the whole storytelling thing was watching movies and telling stories, in the neighborhoods, so I didn't have an influence as a writer. I was the writer. I was doing it verbally instead of written. And so I was the one that was always talking about what happened at the party, what happened at the fight, what happened when we went downtown, what the girl looked like, what the party flowed like, who was wearing what, who threw the first punch in the fight. So I was always the verbal dude, like, no, this ain't how it went. Dude threw a punch over here, and this dude. So I was always in the middle of the circle as far as, and if you got something wrong, I would correct you. No, that's not how it went. This is how it went. And so I was never influenced by a writer. My writing came straight from me looking at what was going on and being very descriptive. So when I started reading other people's work, stealing stuff later on, then it would be, Walter Mosley with his mystery books and how he described things. Terry McMillan and how she, had chapter titles. For every chapter, she had a
Yeah.
title for the chapter. And then her
Mhm.
stuff was contemporary. And then the poetic, Afrocentric flow of Toni Morrison. There was a whole lot of people once I started writing. But I didn't have any influence to start writing. It was me that was a storyteller already. I wasn't reading books. I tell people all the time, I've always been smart, but I've never been a nerd. Never. You know what I
Mm.
mean? So I was always an athlete. I was always outside. And in the neighborhood I grew up in, everybody had to fight in the bottom of West Philly. That's all of us were fighters. So I didn't have a chance to be a nerd, but I was still smart. So I was an aggressively smart, which when you're aggressively smart, they call you something different. You know what I mean? They don't call you a nerd. Typically, they call you arrogant because
Yeah.
you protect your intelligence. You protect it and you dominant with it, and they don't like that. They want to take it away from you. So I was, well, he think he knows something. He think he,
Hmm.
because I was very confident in my confidence and my skill base. But yeah, I wasn't really influenced by other writers. I was influenced by the surroundings, everything that
Mm.
was going on. This girl, this car, this fight, this party, me watching everything and then knowing how to verbalize it. That was it. So I really wasn't influenced by other writers.
Mm. I get it. Similar stories. I'm very well aware of Philadelphia. I actually visit there about twice a month. I have a lot of family. that lived there, but also smart in school, growing up in the projects. That wasn't celebrated. Also coined arrogant, and protecting my smartness by not allowing that to deter me from going after what I knew was destined for me. But Omar, that had to come from somewhere. So although no one kind of shaped your literary side, who helped shape the man Omar Tyree? Was it family? Was it friends? And I know that you mentioned your community and your environment, but were there people who helped shape you as an individual?
Yeah, I grew up in the baby boom era. I wasn't part of the baby boom era, but my mother was the oldest of eight, and my father was the oldest of four. So what happens is I end up being the oldest grandchild. I'm right in the middle of aunts and uncles that not that older than me. I had an uncle that was 2 years older than me. So I grew up with uncles, aunts, and cousins. They were from the baby boom era. I wasn't, but if you grown up with them, you're gonna act just like they do. So I'm old school to the core, man, loyal to the core. And then you had uncles and older cousins that were part of that manhood. So it was very physical. You know, the first words I knew was for manhood was take it like a man playing football. They didn't want you crying and whining and whimpering, you know, because then grandma, what y'all doing down in the basement? Because you tackling, you trying to get to the wall and tag the wall at the football, and they tackling you on hard cement in the basements in Philly. And then whenever you got hurt, take it like a man, because they didn't want you crying and whining, and then grandma stopping what we were doing. And so that was the first thing of manhood for me, toughness. You know, so I've never
Mm,
had a broken body, broken bone, or whatnot. The toughness, and then you get older, and then there's responsibility. You have football coaches. We have football coaches that were black police officers. We had this league called PAL, Police Athletic League, and so all these
yes.
guys, yeah, these guys were black, you know, police officers. So they had that tough love approach. Look here, now I don't want to lock you up. I see you doing something. You keep, you know, so of course you really do understood. Like, and then when you got in the household, I had a stepfather, 6'4", 230 pounds. So I'm still not that big. You know, now he put on some weight. He might be 250, 6'4", but he's older now, you know. But with that, you grew up, and his whole thing was, you know, you got new laws, new rules, and new regulations. You ain't gonna be running around in the street wild and all that. And so responsibility of manhood, you know, with them type of men being around you, it's all hardcore responsibility, doing what you need to do, no excuses, no feelings. And that's another thing, you know, when you start talking about men versus women, the feelings component, they took that out as young men. Like you ain't, we don't hear about no feelings. You got to go to work. You got to take care of your family. You got to be tough. You got nobody want to hear nothing about no feelings. How you feel about this? How you feel? So with men, we ain't got time for that. You got to go do your work, do what you need to do. And so that's why I was influenced by uncles, cousins, football coaches, my stepfather, you know, and that was the time, the 1970s, 1980s, very masculine Philadelphia, very masculine.
Mm, mm. You know, we have such similar stories, and you know, you shared about how Black men aren't encouraged to show emotion, to be vulnerable. But as you were talking, I'm just like, you know, as a Black woman, it's the same story on this side as well. Especially, like I said, growing up in the projects, we had to be strong,
Yeah,
boy or girl, you had to be strong. And if you weren't, you would get eaten up by the
yeah,
streets. And this is why I'm always encouraging people who, when you become an adult and they see your strength, they see your fortitude, and they translate it into arrogance. And I'm just like, if they only knew my
yeah,
story and not my
yeah,
glory, they would understand those people and the environment that shaped me. And this is why I'm so audacious
yeah,
now.
yeah.
So I totally get it, but very similar stories. I also ran track through PAL. So I had, you know, once again, very, very similar.
Yeah,
So
it
the
becomes it
uh-huh.
becomes a defense mechanism. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? You want to protect from people trying to crush your dreams every day. You know what I
yeah.
mean? So you start saying, look, I ain't listening to you. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't, and then they look at that like, was you something wrong with her? She just want to ignore people. She hard headed. You know, because you're supposed to listen to them and just be a regular person, 9 to 5, no dreams, no. When you listen to them. But when you don't listen to them, oh, you think you know somebody, you think you bigger than somebody. You think so we get beat up either way, man. So, you know, yeah, I went through that too. When you think you can do something in the hood and everybody else is doubting you. But my aunts and uncles, they were optimistic too. They did some great things. So we had that kind of family that we gonna do it anyway, no matter what y'all think.
Mm,
And I was the youngest in the household. We had
mm,
like 15 to 20 people in the house because my grandmother was like the favorite aunt of all the cousins. And so every time they got kicked out the house or something crazy, Aunt Geraldine, I'm coming to stay with y'all for a minute. And then my mother was the oldest, so I couldn't come home and go to an apartment or whatnot. So I'm at grandmom's every single day, and my mom just picked me up after work. So I'm with
mm,
grandmom and them with all the cousins and aunts and uncles and all that stuff. Then I got my own room at night. So I was spoiled, rough and spoiled at the same time. So it's crazy because my mom had money, but I'm still growing up in poverty. So I'm spoiled, but I'm
mm,
still in poverty. So I still got
mhm.
the feeling of poverty, but I can do whatever I want to do. So now it's awkward because I'm this aggressive, rough, inner city, intellectual dude who's spoiled, who's still optimistic. And so it catches you off guard. Like, well, if you from the hood, you supposed to be thinking like this, not
Yeah,
like this. How did you end up thinking like this? So it's just a weird thing when I really look back at, my
yeah,
whole life trajectory, just really different. Even the
yeah.
fact with me being a hyper intelligent dude, but never being a nerd. You know what I mean? Like I've never been that. And so it's always been like he a cool, smart dude. You
Mm,
know what I mean?
mhm,
Or they
mhm.
try to put the term street smart in front of it, right? We can't just be smart. It got to be street
Right,
smart. We got to put the
right.
adjective in front of it to make it black and cool.
Yeah. But we only do that in our community, which is so sad. We always try to minimize
Yeah,
excellence, Black
yeah,
excellence. It just can't be you're smart. Like you said, it
yeah,
has to be you're nerd smart. No, why can't we
yeah,
just smart? So I'm very proud to hear your story of where you came from and, managed to go to Howard, another institution of
yeah.
Black excellence, something that they're trying to minimize
Yeah.
in
And
space.
they didn't think I could get in there either. You can't go to Howard, man. That's the number one HBCU. And then I got in there and graduated with honors. And the only
Mm,
reason I didn't have a magna because my first semester I wasn't planning on staying. I just wanted to check out the atmosphere. And then my grandmother got to me and she was like, "Well, you're the oldest grandson, and don't worry about it. Go to Cuba, do what you want to do. Everybody's watching you. You're the first one.
mm.
They going
Oh,
you setting the example, but go do what you want to do. If you want to drop out, go drop out." So she did the reverse psychology on me, like, "Oh, you the oldest, everybody watching you, but you go do what you want to do. Don't worry about us." I was like, "All right, grandma, I'm gonna finish for y'all." And I've never had my Howard degree. I finished it, I gave it to my mother. My mother passed away from sarcoidosis in 96, and then my grandmother got it. So it's been on my grandmother's wall ever since the 90s, my
oh,
Howard University degree, because it was more important for them. I knew what I was going to do regardless because I was already a scholar. I was going to learn what I needed to learn. But that degree from Howard, I gave it to my mom and my grandmom, and they're real proud of that. And then my younger brother, sure enough, went to the graduation and he said, "I want to come here." He looking at the girls and stuff. And he went ahead and went to Howard and graduated from Howard because he saw his older brother. And that's exactly what my parents told me. I said, "Look at this. Look at this.
wow.
I didn't ask to be the first one. I didn't ask to be born first, but I got to deal with it." So yeah, you
Mm,
got to invest get part of manhood again. My mother was like, "You the oldest. You got to." It wasn't no getting away from it. I was back and forth arguing with her. Then my grandmother got me. "You my oldest grandson." So I was like, I got to do it. You know what I mean? So again, I had to take my emotions out of it. All right, I'm gonna finish for y'all, and I did it.
mm. That was making me think about a lot, just about the responsibility to continue the narrative and the journey of excellence. And oftentimes, excellence isn't just for us.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's about paying it forward and making
yeah,
sure that we're providing the same pipeline to access to someone else. But with that responsibility comes a lot of pressure. Did you
yeah.
feel pressure to stay in college because your mother was encouraging you and your grandmother was encouraging you? Did you feel pressure?
Well, if you want to say pressure on somebody else forced you to do something you didn't want, but I didn't have pressure in finishing. It's like it was easy to me. So the pressure for me was this is not what I want to do, and that's what they want me to do. But then I had to take it off and say, all right, that's my family. They're right. I am the oldest. So all right, let me just do that. So I said, all right, I'm gonna finish these last 1 year. It was only 1 year left, right? I said, let me finish this 1 year for you guys. and I did it, So now when you go through that, now if I got kids, of course I got to do the same thing. Like, hey, I finished, you gonna finish, So both my sons finished as well. But yeah, I had to go ahead and do. But that's what I was saying earlier. When you got to do what you got to do, you got to do what you got. Ain't no emotions involved. And I
Mhm.
think like today's generation, it's too many emotions involved when they get to back out. Where we didn't get to back out. We didn't get to back out. You coming out of Brooklyn, you know what you got to deal with. You don't get to back out. These
Yeah.
kids now, it's like they got too many options. All right, I'm gonna do this instead. I'm gonna do this instead. I'm gonna do. We didn't have them options. You don't have no option. Finish this or go live out in the street somewhere. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like that. So that's what it was. We had to grow up
Yeah.
that way, and it's old
Yeah.
school. Now it's
I'm
called
glad that
old
you
school.
I'm
Yeah.
glad that you segued into that about this new generation and how things are different. Aside from doing radio and podcasting, I'm also an educator. I started off as a classroom teacher, and now I'm a high school administrator. I've been in education for over 25 years. And it is a daily struggle just encouraging kids or reminding kids or convincing kids that sometimes you just got to push through.
Yeah.
There's so much privilege and there's so much entitlement in this generation. And this is why people like us, we have to keep these conversations going to remind them that sometimes you just really don't have a choice.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just have to keep one foot in front of the other. So I'm glad that you mentioned that because that was definitely a gem and a tool that a lot of this generation of young minds need to hear. But
Yeah.
another milestone and pivotal moment that you were able to be successful in was signing to a major publishing company, Simon and Schuster, your first time around as an author. How did that happen? Because that's not an easy feat. How were you able to sign with Simon and Schuster your first time around?
I was already selling books. So just like the kids are doing now, big fish swallow little fish, but you got to be in the water already. So I already
Mm,
had 3 books out. My first book, Colored on White Campus, I wrote when I was at Pittsburgh, 19 years old. Then I wrote Flyy Girl between 19 and 20 because I started it in March. My birthday's in April. So I started it at 19 and I finished like I guess at the end of April. So I was 20 because I turned 20 in April. So I was 19 to 20. It was only took like 2 months to finish, but it started in March, finished in April after I turned 20. And then and when DC, they called it the murder capital when I was there. It
mm,
was really vicious with drug selling in the early 90s. After Rayful Edmonds, he was like the king of illegal pharmaceuticals. He went to jail when I first got there in '89, and all the underlings in DC wanted to take over. So they called it the murder capital for 90,
mm,
91, 92 with so many deaths. If you was in the drug trade, they were not playing in DC. Do not sell
mm,
on my corner. I will
mhm,
kill you. And them jokers
mhm,
wasn't playing. But if you wasn't selling drugs, you ain't want to worry about DC. But I wrote that book too. It's called Capital City, The Chronicles of the DC Underworld. So that was my first 3 books, College Boy, where it's colored on white campus with all the blacks going to predominantly white schools. Like I was at Pittsburgh. We were like 5% of the population. Then I went to the
mm,
HBCU. I had the Howard thing with the Flyy Girl thing I wrote, about the 1980s hip hop era. And then it was the gangster era, the drug dealing era of the night. So all those books were already out. And then I did a lot of expo events, just like I got a table right in front of me right now where I got all my books on the table and stuff. So I can see, you guys can see that's the table.
nice.
Yeah, so I used to have tables like that where you would do expo events in New York and Philly and DC, Baltimore, Atlanta, Cleveland, Detroit, and then you just rent a table for $200 at these expo events and then
Yep.
sell your books from the table. And
Yep.
I would make like $1,800 in a weekend, you know what I mean? And then, sell you. And so I kept doing that. And then I was selling books out of stores and I was distributing out of stores, New York, Philadelphia, Virginia, so the publishers were learning about like who's this Omar guy with this Flyy Girl book, and then I hooked up with the super agent Denise Stinson, and she was out of Michigan, and Denise was a big time sister with getting publishing deals. I met her through a sister named Vanessa Lloyd Somebody out of Philadelphia who does a lot of PR events with books. And so it was just like one person meeting the other person meeting, and then the name would start bubbling. Who's Omar Tyree with this Flyy Girl book? And that's how it ended up leading to Simon and Schuster. And they had a sister there named Dawn Daniels, who was like one of the few black editors at a major house. And I
Mm,
immediately was like, all right, I want to sign with the black editor. I want to sign with the black. So I'm telling Denise Stinson, like, hey, let's sign with the black woman. And she went in there and got the money immediately. And then she was like, Omar, the money came too fast. I'm gonna ask for more money. And I was like, hey, don't mess it up. Don't mess it up. Don't mess it up. And she's
Right.
like, no. She said, no, I know how this game works. And she went out there and got me double of what I asked for. And I was like, wow. And that was with the, Simon Schuster, Dawn Daniels, the black editor. And then we went from there. I was already a hustler, already knew how to sell, already, a media person. And so I knew how to do interviews and a whole nine. And so I jumped right on in. But that's how that happened. I was already in the game,
Mm.
already a professional. I was just young and doing it. And you know how it is now. When they grab you young, I was 25 years old. They grab you young, they jumping up and down because they like, we got it, we got it. And then I just went ahead and did my thing once I got in the door.
Wow. But you mentioned once again some other gems. You were doing the work already.
Yeah,
Nothing was just handed to you. You were actively doing the work. You were going out there. You
yeah,
were participating in
yeah,
the evolution of your success. Nothing was just handed to you. You were able to connect and meet with people who were in the field to make sure that they took your career from point A to point Z. What I really want to understand, because as you were showing us the books that line your table right now, Omar, do you even understand the magnitude of the impact that you've made on people's lives like me? Do you understand that?
I don't because you're still living, So when I wrote my book, Just Say No, which became that's my favorite book. This big, thick 500 pager. The character in it, John Loverboy Williams. He told his friend, he said, to be a legend, you got to die while you're in the middle of it. This is his
Mm.
philosophy because I'm writing, and he was like, if you don't die in the middle of it, they'll get used to you. You get worn down, and you just become the old man. He push you aside. And so, in his philosophy, he wanted to die at the king of his childhood, like Tupac Shakur and Biggie, because now they can never talk about the negative parts of you. You got all positive stuff. You see what I'm talking
No.
about? Yeah. So when you're still alive and whatnot, you're still trying to do things. So you can ride up and down with your popularity and what you're doing. You say the wrong things, you do the wrong things. Now they don't like you. So yeah, when you got to live through it, it's different. You know what I mean? Because you still in your bus. So it's still things I want to do. I still want to do movies. I haven't been able to do that. And so now the things you've been successful at, the things you haven't been successful at, you're thinking about those things now. And so you don't really get a chance to really enjoy it unless you just want to settle in with your life and say, all right, this is all I'm going to do. I still got things I want to do. So if you still got things you want to do, you still got motivation, you still got, successes and failures. And so, yeah, you don't feel it because you're still here. I'm still alive. I'm still energized, still trying to do stuff. So, yeah, it's a funny feeling because you know that you done some of that stuff, but you're still thinking, I want y'all to see this in a movie now. I want y'all to see my other ideas. I want y'all to see my international ideas. So I'm still working hard trying to get new things done.
I get that, Omar, but I beg to differ. I don't want us to wait until we're dead and we're carried by six, and there's a whole lot of slow singing and flower bringing. Shout out to Biggie. I want us to get our flowers while we're still here to smell them.
Yeah,
Yesterday I was listening to a church sermon, and it said that you have to have the courage to be disliked. And, while we're alive, we just have to feel these emotions of being liked and being disliked,
yeah,
and to understanding that we've done some great work. Recently I created this amazing partnership with NYU Hospital for a New York City high school, just providing a pipeline to college admission and to those students who are interested in becoming doctors. And someone stopped me and they said, "Do you understand what you've done just now?" And I was like, "No." And when they spoke to me, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize it because I was just going through the motions of, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
yeah,
So I was going to encourage you, Omar, stop sometimes and give yourself credit, because there are people like me. I'm not waiting until you die or
yeah,
you transition. I want to give you your flowers now. So in this moment, I want to let you know that as a young girl growing up in Brooklyn, I read all of your books
yeah.
and I was captivated by them, and they helped shape the woman that I am today. And for that, I thank you while you're still alive and able to hear it. So I want you to receive that.
Thank you. Thank you. I was in an event in Virginia, Yeah, I got allergy season, so it's killing me, man. Daggone allergy, where your nose keep running for no
I get
reason.
it.
You
Me
don't have a
too.
cold, and it's daggone allergy. But anyway, so I was in Virginia, and the sister was saying that I had a style of writing, and I was like, nah, my books are always changing because I got different subjects. She said, yeah, but your women are always strong women. And then
Mm-hmm.
I had to stop, and I was like, yeah, you're right. Because
Mm-hmm.
my mother, again, my mother was the oldest of eight, and she was the official boss of the household. Like it
Mm-hmm.
was crazy because again, I'm a storyteller. I knew who my mother was talking to without being in the room based on how she was talking.
Mm-hmm.
So if she had this highfalutin voice, oh, how are you? Oh, I'm gonna be there working. I said, okay, she's talking to some white people at work because she would do this highfalutin. Oh, how are you? And whenever I said it, oh, sound like a white woman on the phone. Oh, boy, stop that. Boy, don't do that. Boy, no. And then she get on him. And then when she was talking to her girlfriends, it'd be this matter of fact thing. Yeah, girl. So I told her this, and then I told her, and then she gonna try to do this. So she sounded like the girlfriend talk then. And then I knew when she was talking to family members, because she went into that boss mode. Well, who's she talking to? Well, have her call me. Well, I'll call her up and tell her because she went to. So I knew who my mom was talking to based on how she spoke on the phone. So I always understood, the elements of hierarchy and you
Yeah.
know what I mean,
Yeah.
individuals in power positions. And I
Yeah.
was in that same position. I was born into it. I'm the biggest cousin. So I got all these younger cousins, and they all looking at me like and you hanging out with the uncles and the aunt and the aunts. So I'm like my youngest next cousin was like 5 years younger than me. So he like
Mm.
a kid. When you 8
Right.
years old and he's 3, you're like, man, he a kid. He can't go out with it. He can't go to the playground. So it's like I already had, you know what I mean, that hierarchy and stature. My whole life is nothing I can do about it. I was born into that position. And so I tell people all the time, is look, dude, I'm not a follower. I don't know how to follow. And even
Mm.
when I was meeting people, when I'm doing I was very used to being around older people because I grew up with them. So now when I get around the distributors and they're 40 something and I'm 20 something, they're like, man, you seem like you were older dude. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
because I grew up. I'm telling you, like I grew up with older aunts and uncles. So I
Yeah.
don't feel that, like, oh, you too older than me. No, I'm like, hey man, let's do business. They were like, man, you act like you're our age. So the business for me, it was easy and natural, central. I was a hard worker already. I was a kid that grandma would send to the store and I come there quick and get me a quarter for it. I was quick. Well, like grandma, like send the grandson. He gonna get there the fast. He ain't gonna no messing around, none of that. I was not playful at all. I was a very serious kid because of
Mm.
how I was raised and the level I was raised in. Being the oldest, I'm the chief of the family. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm in that position. So I had to, take that mantle and run with it. If there wasn't nowhere, nothing else I could do. They kept saying that you the oldest, you the oldest, you the
Right.
oldest. And God
Mm.
dang on it, I didn't have to be the oldest. But
Right.
so when you get to be older and people like, well, I can't I'm trying to figure out Omar. You got it. When I tell him this history, like, oh, now I get it. Like he was
Yeah.
in that position. You didn't know me, but when you get in them, people are like, well, who does Omar think he is? Dude, I'm the chief of my family. I'm sorry if I need to apologize to you for my authority, but I've always been in this position, and there's
Yeah.
nothing getting around it. I'm the dude. So when everybody I'm still here. They gonna always say, call Uncle Omar, call Cousin Omar, that's what it is. So you have
Yeah.
to accept that responsibility. It's like the Lion King. I'm the next man up, and you got to go ahead and get your wars ready, get your, your muscles ready, and do what you got to do. So I didn't have a choice. I didn't have a
I hear
choice.
that. I did not have a choice. I love that. I love that quote. Now let's talk about some things that are fact or fiction, right? So is it fact or fiction that an author can only write about the experiences that they've gone through?
Right.
Is that fact or fiction that they can only write about experiences that they've gone through? Or can they write about experiences that other people have gone through? Is that fact or fiction?
Yeah, I tell people all the time, if you can only write what you know, you got about 3 books in you before you start being redundant. you
Mm,
gotta you gotta write what you research, and that's why my degree in journalism becomes huge because I can always research things all day long. Now I wrote a football book about the Eagles in Green Bay in Brazil. They went to Brazil in September last year, and I didn't get a chance to go to that game, But I got online and did all the research I needed to do on Brazil, Sao Paulo, and I already know Philadelphia. I went online and did research on Green Bay. So I pieced that story together. Then I had to get the Portuguese translation, and I did all that without even going to Brazil. And that joint is on point because again, you're doing your research, you reading, listening, and I'm from Philadelphia, so I know what the Philadelphians are like and what we do with the games and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I've done a whole lot of books. California, I'm not from there, did a book on California. St. Louis, I'm not from there, did a book on St. Louis. Brooklyn, I've been up there plenty of times in New York, did New York book. The Caribbean islands, I've been down there, wrote books about it. I've been over to London. I want to write books about Africa, the Middle East, Shanghai. I wrote a book about Dubai, Welcome to Dubai, in my traveler series. So yeah, I got 30 plus books because I know how to research and write about things that I may not know, but I'm interested in. And I went to a forum from Octavia Butler, the famous sci-fi and fantasy writer who passed away. Octavia Butler, she said the same thing years ago. This was 1996. She said, you write what you're interested in and what you're passionate about. Because you can have stuff you know and be bored with it, and you're going to write a boring book because you're bored with it. And that's the same way I would be if you asked me to write a Flyy Girl 2025. I'm like, dude, I was passionate when I was young, when I was
Mm-hmm.
19. But at this age, nah, I'm not thinking about that right now. I'm thinking about other stuff that I'm passionate about. So when you write it when you're passionate, it comes out a lot different from just trying to write something because you want to make money or somebody told you to write it or you got a, 2-book deal on a contract and you got to finish the second book. I always wrote from passion. And so my books are always on point, but research allows you to write anything. I'm not from DC, but I lived down there. I did the research on what areas were the roughest areas, how they talk, what they did, what they did. I always was doing research on people's slang. New York, of course, has the most slang of anybody, but every city has their own slang. So you can't have people talking in DC the way they speak in New York because they speak differently. With the
Right.
shorty and the Joe and the let me find out and Curry and all that, everybody got their own language. So that's the
Yeah.
first thing you got to learn. Like, hey, man, they speak different in Chicago. They speak different in LA. They speak different in Houston. They
Yeah.
speak different in Detroit with the all 100. So you got to be very cognizant when you're doing research. Your ears always have to be open. How do they speak in Brooklyn? How do they speak in Harlem? How do they speak in the Bronx? You guys got 5
Yeah.
different
It's
boroughs
different.
where they different in each one.
Yeah.
So you got
Yeah.
to understand that as a storyteller. But yeah, you always got to have your thinking button on when you writing stories. But yeah, people say that you write what you know. That's why we don't get a lot of credit for how much we know as
Yeah.
writers. We
Yeah.
know a lot because we're always researching stuff that
Mm-hmm.
we're interested in. I read for interest. I read for information, not for enjoyment. You got a lot. Oh, I'm just doing. I enjoy information. That's why I have to tell people that all the time. I enjoy knowing stuff. I
Yeah.
don't like saying I don't know. I don't like that. I
Yeah.
remember when Chris Rock had that famous one when he was talking about black people love saying I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. And dude, I was like, dude, I would make up something before I said I
Yes.
don't like saying that
Yes.
because you feel idiotic. Like I should know this. How come I don't? In fact, when we was coming up in Philly, we used to have this saying, if you don't know, you better ask somebody. You better
Yeah.
find out. Remember we used to say that? You better
Yes.
find out. You better ask somebody.
Ask
So
somebody.
we made it into a smart though. You don't know, you
Yeah.
better ask them. You better find out. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I didn't like that whole I don't know thing. I want to find the answers, and that's what they're talking about. If you want to write more books, you got to find the answers to the
Mm.
solutions, to the problems, to the issues, and then write about it. And that's why I got 30 books. I went away from it for a while because I wanted to do movies. I wanted to still tell stories. Movies are hard to get the money, but now I'm back in the book game. I got new books coming next year, and I got new books I'm already starting on. And I want to be an editor and edit other people's books. So I'm going to be negotiating, an imprint deal, one of the majors. I started talking to Simon Schuster. I might end up talking to Random House and Hackett because now I know so much about books and how to do it. I want to be able to pass that down to the other kids and publish the books that I believe in because now social media is really taking over where now you got to be popular before you can do anything. And that's awkward because you can have a whole lot of intelligent people who are not social media, mavericks or on, look at me, look at me. This is the most vain community we've ever had, man. Like everything is look at me, look at me, look at me. And I'm like, yo, dude, what if you got a genius writer who ain't thinking about looking at them? They just into their
Right.
book and they don't have a social media following and they're not popular. I want to be able to push them out there and make the book popular. A lot of companies don't want to do that now. They want to buy a ready-made person. It's
Yeah.
hard now, man. It's really
Yeah.
hard.
It is. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, that today's space is measured upon the likes on social
Yeah,
media, and
yeah,
you could be the most popular person, the most intellectual person, and get overlooked because the likes don't equate to what
yeah.
they so I want that for you, Omar. I want you to transition into that space so that you can further drive in the narrative that this algorithm isn't working.
Yeah, right,
And,
right.
so many people are going to get lost
Yeah.
if we stick to this current algorithm. It just isn't working. But another question when it comes to fact or fiction for an emerging author, does a successful author have to just stick to one genre of writing? Is that fact or fiction?
That's another one. Again, I've done all the different genres too. Yeah, I got children's books, I got mystery, I got the urban fiction, I got the romance fiction, I got the thrillers, I got the science fiction. Yeah, I got horror. I did a vampire story, a werewolf story. I know how to write those. So yeah, if you know how to go into it, you got to read other people's work. But again, I watch movies all the time, so a lot of the stuff it comes from other stuff where I'm really checking it out. So that's the same thing. If you stuck in a genre and can't write other genres, then you got to
Mhm.
stay there because that's what you know. But if you know how to bounce around and do other things, so I wrote the autobiography of Marion Barry. I've helped other people to write their books because I understand the facts and I understand the fiction and I understand how to
Mhm.
mix them both together and I understand different genres. I love science fiction; it's my favorite movies. When you start talking about aliens and Star Wars and really all the Marvel comics is science fiction. They call it hero stuff, but if you think about the heroes, it's all dealing with science, X-Men and mutants and special biogenic, issues and all, and science, space and all. It's science fiction. But they call it superheroes because they got superpowers. But yeah, that's my favorite film stuff, science fiction. So I can write that too. But then when you start writing for black people, they have to now be the audience. Are you going to read science fiction? So
Right.
actually, even when I wrote the Traveler series, we grew up on James Bond, right? It's Bond. The name is Bond, James Bond. So we
James Bond.
grew up, and he would always travel to these exotic locations, right, all over the. And I'm sitting there watching, like, damn, he's in Brazil. Now he's in Australia. Now he's in Japan. Now he's in London. Now he's in the Caribbean. And so you love that. So I wanted to create a series called The Traveler. And then black people with me, it was like, well, I don't get to travel like that. I probably wouldn't read that. So I'm like, man, so now you're restricting what I
Right.
can write because I had to have an audience for it. So now I can't write that because you're not going to. So I went ahead and changed the character to a white character, wrote the book. People that read it loved it. I had a black female to be his supervisor. You know what I mean? But if we're not going to read it, I had Will Smith in the lead. Then I had to change Will Smith to a white guy and so yeah, it can discourage us from being able to write if we don't think that we write in certain genres and whatnot. Even Octavia Butler, she didn't want to use her photo because she didn't want people to see that she was black when she was writing science fiction and fan. Yeah, she said this in '96 when I went to it was the Atlanta Art Festival. They have the book festival there every summer in Atlanta. And I was there in '96. And yeah, Octavia Butler, big time. She got a book called Wild Seed, that's science fiction fantasy. That's my favorite book of all time, mixing African history and African mythology with science, with sci-fi and stuff. So yeah, man, the research is important to be able to move around in different genres, but you have to have an audience that's willing to
Mm.
move with you. And
Mm.
that the audience can hold you back if they
Yeah.
only want you to write street books and you want to write something else. If they only want you to write romance and you want to write something else. If they want you to write girl books and you happen to be a male. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Because this book, in fact, this book here, if you can see it, it has a guy on the cover with the girls at the bottom screaming and yelling like they do at a concert. That's what they
Yeah.
do. And I
Hmm.
had a woman that emailed me and I was like, yeah, my new book out, Just Say No. And she was like, is that the book with the guy on the cover? And I just stuck with the guy on it just, I can't put a guy, I was like, wait a minute. I can't put a guy, I'm a guy. I'm writing about guys. I can't put a guy on my cover. So it kind of behooved me that we had gotten to the point where we were so used to feminine books that I'm
Yeah.
not even, and I'm a guy, I'm a straight male. I'm like, yo, dude, I can't write a male book now. Like you guys want your books that much? So I said, wow, this is something else. But yeah,
Yeah.
you get impacted by a lot of what you know, and people try to push you into that. But it's up to you to let them know that you can write other things.
Yeah. Well, you just mentioned, writing other things. You mentioned Octavia Butler. You
Yeah.
mentioned, she didn't even want her picture to be on the book. But as you were talking about those things, it made me think about the emergence of what they termed as urban literature.
Well,
And
I get in trouble with that because I inspired a whole lot of people that because I started calling it urban because of radio. So again, even with that, the credit again, I was the first to do that because I was down there in D.C. with Kathy Hughes, WOL Radio at 8th and 8th Street, Northeast D.C., hanging out with them. I'm a young whippersnapper, so she used to say, "I got to pay my bills, got to pay the bills," and she do a commercial, but they called it urban instead of black. And so I was hip, like, it's black radio, but they using the word urban. Urban top this, urban 40, urban contemporary, urban adult. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna call my black books urban. So I started saying urban classic, urban books, urban, and it picked up, man, and catched on in the early 90s. And then the people that was in prison, they started putting the street word on it. So then it was urban street, because they writing these street books, drug dealer books and all that. And so then it blew up, but it got to the point where it started outsizing the science fiction and outdoing the mystery books and outdoing the children's book. Then it was like you go to the black section of the bookstore and
but you saw,
every book is Gangster
yeah,
Girl 5, Good Round
yeah,
Away Girl. And then it got to the point I'm like, yo, this, okay, I understand I started something. That don't mean everybody got to do it and everybody do it all the time. And that's the only books we put out. And so
yeah,
then they started getting mad at me like, well, Omar, how you going to tell us to stop writing? I'm not saying to stop writing them, but you got to write about other stuff. We not just urban hood in this. I'm like, yo, we got other stories. So I got in trouble for that, but I'm willing to say, like, we got too many of them, dude. We got other
yeah,
genres. Now it's toned down, it's calmed down. But yeah, I
yes,
mean, we went through that period, and
yeah,
people was beating up me, and I was like, look, man, I feel like Frankenstein. You make the map, and then the monster goes out there and starts killing people, and you got to go out there and grab him back into the lab. Like, what are you doing, Frankenstein? What are you
right,
doing? And he's like, oh, he's strangling
yeah,
people. So I'm like, yo, dude, I created something that I got to go grab and put it back in the shelter or something, because it got out
yeah,
of hand. But yeah, you
it
had a whole
did,
lot of people. How dare you try to take away my money and all this other stuff? I'm like, yo, dude, I'm protecting the culture at this point.
yeah,
I wrote books that needed to be written, but after you get to like the 20th Gangster Girl books, it's like, yo, dude, do we need another Gangster Girl book?
right,
Particularly if they're not learning the lessons. And that's the other thing. My books taught you lessons. And so
yeah,
some people could be like, well, Omar's book. No. Every single book that I put out, I ended it with responsibility. I ended it with a lesson where I can say, hey, she went to college at the end of this. Did your girl go to college at the end of her? You know what I mean? So it's like at the end of the day, and then when I came back to the sequel, For the Love of Money, and then Boss Lady, she did some bigger things. You know what I mean? So I didn't keep it in the hood. She kept elevating. And even though people was mad at me, why she didn't marry Victor? Okay, so now I got a dude to go to jail. He's supposed to wait 8, 9 years, come out, marry her. So she didn't ignore, and she went to Hampton. So now she didn't went to school with college dudes, got
right,
out of school, ignored all them dudes waiting. I said, man, that's totally disrespectful to an HBCU, man, that I'm gonna go to school with
okay,
this girl for 4 years, but I'm not good enough for her while she waiting around. I said, that's
mm.
crazy, man. And even the dude in jail was like, I wouldn't expect you to do that. I'm in jail. You need to go on with your life. You know what I mean? So it was crazy.
But you know what? As you were talking, it reminded me of, and I hate to say this about us, the Black community. Sometimes we are so used to the trauma of it all that we just can't let it go. So
Yeah,
that's why, they wanted you to write that book differently because they
yeah,
wanted the main character, the woman, to stick to the trauma of let
yeah,
me just wait. Let me not go through the Black excellence experience of going to Hampton and making something about, no, let me wait for somebody who's going to do 9 years in jail. So we are
yeah,
so
yeah.
attached to trauma. But going back to the oversaturation of the urban literature, I'm so glad that it ended because it looked like the publishing companies wanted to capture that and they weren't willing to sign anyone unless they had that street literature, and it kind of dummied down, in my opinion, literature. What do you think about that?
Well, when you say that, you got to be careful because their main goal was money.
Yeah.
So the street stuff was cheap They wasn't asking for a lot. Oh, just give me 20,000. They had to pay me 250. So it's a different level. So now you come in there as a literate writer, you want 100, but a street writer just wants 15,000, and it's selling. So you got to understand the publisher was like, hey man, this stuff sells. If we don't have to edit it a lot, you know, so it wasn't a thing, but they wasn't trying to get the, but money is money. So they're like, okay, this stuff is, and so yeah, it got to the point where it was too much of it, and then everybody's getting money, and then they're getting in the way of the bigger stuff. You know, now the sales even, because I was doing bigger sales before a whole lot of urban street. Then they jump in, and then my sales go down because I'm
Mhm.
competing with people. And then I'm gonna tell you a book, Leslie, my New Orleans book. I love this book. It's my favorite character, New Orleans. This book suffered because it's in hardback. It costs $22 plus taxes, $25. People were selling $10 books like all
Yeah.
over Harlem. So it's like, Omar, they're not going to buy a $25 book if they can buy three for 25. So I was getting beat up. So now they're like, well, Leslie ain't that good because it ain't selling. It is good, but they looking at a price tag versus the. So then I started doing the analogy. That's where I really started thinking about film. I said, I got to get a helicopter. If you driving from Philly to New York and you want that turnpike, I don't care if you want a Rolls Royce. If you want that Jersey Turnpike and it's jam packed, you ain't going nowhere fast. So you right next to a Yugo, you right next to a Kia Soul, you right next, and you in a Rolls Royce, and you're like, man, I'm right next to this guy. But if you get a helicopter, man, you
Mm.
flying right to New York. That's what the movies do. The movies become the helicopter, so you can really see how advanced my stuff was when I was really putting it out there like that. And I didn't get the credit for that because then you had all these other books that were coming out and they just buying it for a cheaper price,
Yeah.
not really for the excellence of the work. And so that went down too.
So when we talk about the monetization of books and the amount of money that authors were earning, and when urban lit started to enter into the genre, and we now saw authors like you not making the same amount of money, we also saw the emergence of digital books, Kindle and Nook. How did that impact the sales or how much money you received as an author? Did it impact you significantly?
No, everybody was bragging about the ebook thing. In the break of the 1990s into 2000, Stephen King, if anybody can break something, it's gonna be Stephen King and our business, right? He's like the dude, the
Right.
American writer. Nobody can argue with. Stephen King couldn't make ebooks go to the next level. He was trying to do. They're gonna read it to a certain extent, but like you said earlier, holding a book in your hand,
Yeah.
having a cover, having a bookshelf where you got multiple books on your bookshelf like that, it's not going away. So I was telling people back then, like, man, you got an ebook reader where you got this device thing and it. So we tried all that. Ebooks are going to sell to a certain extent. It's never going to take out the physical book. Maybe in
Mm,
another 100 years or something, but we're not there yet. So
mm,
people were all talking about it, and then it went back down, and then it does what
yeah.
it does. The
Yeah.
physical book is still the physical book. So yeah,
Yes.
I made a little bit of money off of ebooks, but the whole ebook thing is way overrated. Way
Yeah, it is.
overrated.
It is.
Physical books is still the king.
It is. It is. And like I said, it's paying it forward. I'm seeing the legacy of being an avid reader continue. Like I said, it started with my dad. It spilled over into me. And because I was an avid reader, my daughter is now an avid reader. And I think she challenges herself to read, let's say 200 books, let's say in a year or 6 months.
That's
You
good.
will always find her holding a book. She's familiar. She's about to be 30 on March 20th. She's well aware of who you are. Matter of fact, she's ear hustling because she's a fan of your work. So I love this how everything is, it has a season, it has its time. But once again, the essence of an actual book, it will never, ever go away. Now, what I want to jump into next is, same legendary story, but an all new look. When I
You
saw
got
you on
stuff?
social media mentioning the reemergence of Flyy Girl, I said, oh no, I have to have him on the show. And then I went to a few of my coworkers and I'm just like, guess who I'm going to be talking to tomorrow? And then there was a woman, she is about 35 years old. And I said, Flyy Girl. And she was like, Omar Tyree? I said,
Yeah.
yep, she knows your name. Then I went to a guy and he's about in his 40s. And I said, Flyy Girl, do you know the author? And he was like, no. I said, well, my brother, let me tell you who he is. And then you have to tune in to this episode. And then you also have to talk about his books to your students. So for
Right.
those who don't know about the story of Flyy Girl, remind my audience or introduce to an all new audience, what is the story of Flyy Girl about?
Well, again, I grew up in Philadelphia in the 70s. The 80s became the most materialistic generation Black America ever had. And there's no competition, dude. Like, we had more jewelry, more designer clothes, more hairstyles, more fanciness. And then we were a very extroverted culture. When you start talking about break dancing and hip hop parties, we walked to the parties. We didn't even catch the buses in Philly. You
Okay.
got a bus going right past you. We want to walk
Okay.
because we want to show off our boots. We want to show off our shoes and pocketbooks. We want to go to the mall to buy. And so that generation, man, it's like the 80s was crazy with popularity, ostentatiousness, with the jewelry and all that. And so the word fly, I was at the playground in 1985. I was 16 years old. And I had moved to an area called Mount Airy. And it was like the move up area in Philadelphia. They call it Uptown now, Mary, Germantown, and West Oak Lane. I
Mm-hmm.
had moved on up, because my
Yeah.
mom had the money. So I moved up from West Philly to this area. And when the 80s hit, we had the flyest girls in Philadelphia. And I
Mm-hmm.
already live in that area. And you had guys coming from all over Philly, North Philly, South Philly, West Philly, to talk to these Mount Airy and Germantown and West Oak Lane girls. And so when it came time to start writing books, I was like, yo, man, I'm gonna write about, the Philadelphia Flyy Girl era. When I got to college, they wanted us to write about different scenes and characters and where we're from. And so I already had the whole ideas of us chasing after these ostentatious, fancy girls from the 80s. And then it just went into a whole book of what's her lifestyle like? Why does she chase guys? What kind of guys is there? And so then I wrote it from the girl's perspective instead of my perspective. But I'm one of the guys that wants one of these girls. So it's the same thing with research again. You're writing about the girl that you want, that all of us want. And then I'm breaking her down. What makes her do this? What makes her do that? What kind of family she come from? What does she think about? What does she say here? And so again, with me memorizing how people speak, what they do, what they wear, all the details came together. And I happen to be a writer instead of a rap artist. And so instead of putting out Roxanne, and Old Sheila and Candy Girl, I wrote a book. You see what I'm talking about? But these same songs are like guys talking about girls and music. I wrote the
Mm-hmm.
book, Mary Jane, you know what I mean? All that stuff. We had all these girl names in music. But I was the one that wrote about the Flyy Girl in the book. And we even had a Flyy Girl from Brooklyn, the Boogie Boys, a Flyy Girl, a
Oh.
fly, fly, fly. And so
Uh-huh.
in 85, that song
Uh-huh.
came out. I'm 16. I'm at the playground in West Philly, and that song come on with the DJ, fly, fly. And we got the Flyy Girls at the playground, and we wearing them Hawaiian shirts back then with the BK shoes and the Hawaiian shorts and all that. We had all that stuff. And these are
Uh-huh.
gangsters, hardcore gangsters in Philly wearing Hawaiian stuff, because that was the era. That was the
Mm-hmm.
era. But yeah, I went ahead and wrote the book, and I was the first one to do that with all the lingo, all the stuff we did on point psychology, because I'm from the hood. So I know how we talk, I know how we get down. And then when people got it, it blew their minds like, oh my God, he's right on point with everything. And so it was just one of them things. I wrote it in a book instead of putting it on a song. And that's the only
Got
difference.
it. So,
Yeah.
like I said, we're now seeing a reemergence of Flyy Girl. Now, I know what happened because I've done my research, but tell my audience, how did it come about that we're now seeing a new look to Flyy Girl? How did that come about years later?
Well, I was trying to get the movie done. Lionsgate had the rights to do it. They didn't. I wrote the screenplay too. Amazon has the screenplay, and we were trying to get the thing to happen. But it's like if they don't write the screenplay, you can't do the movie. You don't get the money. You don't do the movie. You don't get the production. And so it's like been years. And so I was like, man, we got to get this thing happening. So I kept saying, hey, man, can I put a tag on the book? Soon to be a major movie that would help the book sell more. And then I
Mm.
started calling Simon Schuster. Hey, it's the 25-year anniversary. Let's put a sticker on it. Hey, it's the 30-year. And they were pretty much ignoring me. Like, oh, when the movie gonna hit? When the movie? They keep asking about them. I said, look, I don't have control over the Hollywood money and the movie stuff, dude. But We got control over the book. We can put it back out. To make a long story short, last year I put out a book called Control because I
Mhm.
don't have control. A lot of us don't have control over a lot of stuff, but we want control. So I put that book out, a psychological thriller with Kensington last year. And Simon Schuster got in touch with me and said, "Hey, we would like to put, your books back out." I thought they was talking about the whole backlist. So I was like, "All right, cool. I want to, teach at the colleges and stuff." But they said, "All right, we just talking about the Flyy Girl series."
Mhm.
So I was like, "All right." And then they asked me if they wanted me to help them design it. I was like, "Yeah." So I had to put the earrings in there because that's the iconic thing. They got to
Yeah.
have triangle earrings. That I
Uh-huh.
that, that I said, okay, each step she elevated. So she elevated from the $300 earrings to the $30,000 Birkin bag. So you see, for the love of money, she's got the Birkin bag on
Yeah.
there. And
Uh-huh.
then the last one's the $300,000 Rolls Royce. So it
Mhm.
shows her elevation going up. Earrings, Birkin bag, Rolls Royce. Of course, when you got a Rolls Royce, now you got the mansion and stuff too. And that's what she did as a character. She went up and up and up and up. And so now that I'm coming back with, I'm like, wow, I wasn't thinking about it when I wrote it. But yeah, the elevation I gave her is amazing. But at the end of that elevation, now we're looking at the boss lady. How do we now deal with the black woman that's the boss lady at the end of
Mhm.
that elevation? You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
now you're dealing with the young girl that was dating any cool drug dealer when she was young. Then she elevated to, okay, now I got to have an educated man with money for my career. Then she elevates, okay, now what man qualifies for me now? You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like I got my own money. And so that's three stages that I actually wrote at a young age that now we got to talk about again with the new books. And I'm like, I'm all for it, talking about that transformation from 17 to 27 to 37. It's
Mm.
something else. It's something else.
We're excited. What do you hope that this trilogy of books does that it hadn't done before?
Well, we're gonna start those new conversations because now I have now created the whole arc of the contemporary black woman. Whether she likes it or not, you got to find another series of books that did what Flyy Girl did. Where
Mm.
you, well, actually, I started at 6 because she had a 6-year-old birthday in the book, 1977. So to go from 1977 in real time into 2025, let me say another series of books that did that. And I'm right on point. When I had the book Boss Lady, Oprah Winfrey was the only one calling herself that outside of Diana Ross, of course, that we
Mm.
grew up with. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
outside of that, Beyonce wasn't Beyonce yet like that. Aaliyah was still here. We didn't have
Mhm.
that ball. We didn't have Megan Thee Stallion. We didn't have, all these new girls that become bigger and bigger and bigger and bosses. Now we got athletic girls that's doing that thing now. So now, from the time that book came out in 2005, we got a whole lot of new boss women in the thought line of that. So it's going to be some great conversations to say, okay, how do we deal with this new power now? Because it is a new power.
Yes, it is a very much new power. So once again, I really loved how you explored the different layers of becoming a woman, from a girl to womanhood and the dynamics of relationships. They have all changed. And we're embarking upon this discussion of the disconnect
Yeah.
between men and women in this era. Do you think that you're going to write a book exploring the disconnect between relationships between men and women?
I'm going to have to
Yeah.
because, this whole tour, I'm going to be talking about it because, again, now watch how this works. We talked about my history. Now, I was raised by men. I had a masculine mother even because she was the oldest. She had 4 younger brothers. When you are older sister to younger brothers, it's a different thing to come out of you because you got to deal with them differently. So
Yeah.
my mother was used to dealing, and then she hung around masculine cousins. And my father, Robert Tyree, the whole neighborhood know he was a fighter, dude. Like your pop was, and then she married a 6'4" Melvin Austin Sr. who was rough from Overbrook High School. Both of them went to Overbrook High School that Will Smith brags about. Of course, Will Smith was a young buck back then. We talking about, in the 60s and the 50s. Both my pops, my real pop dropped out. My stepfather graduated. You know what I mean? So
Mm.
I was raised by all these men, the old school. Now you want a new generation where old school manhood, that's like the Neanderthal thing. That people don't like that anymore. So now I'm stuck in the middle of it. Like, yo, I was raised this way. What do I do now? Now I gotta ask women. what do you want me to be? How do you want me to be? How do I supposed to act with you? What do you want me to do? You want me to
Mm.
open the door? You want me to be? Yeah, because now it's like, what can I get away with as a man? When I was raised that way, so now it's like the older men are like, wow, and then the younger dudes are like, I don't know, dude. I don't know what to do. I don't know what they want. So it's gonna be some great conversations.
But let me tell you, in my opinion, why a lot of that has changed, the disconnect. Because you mentioned when you were growing up, your household had men.
Right.
In today's space, households, a lot of households don't have men in them
Wow.
anymore. And a
Wow.
lot of women are now raising boys. I remember when I became pregnant, and I'm telling this is a true story. I got on my knees and I prayed to God and I said, God, please don't allow me to have a boy because I don't know how I could handle that responsibility to raise a boy into a man. I knew that my job was to be raising a girl into a woman. So I think that that's where a lot of the disconnect starts from. The household dynamics have really changed. Women
Yeah.
are raising boys with the absence of the fathers. Women are getting more college degrees as opposed to men. So now we're on a different playing field. Even
Yeah.
talking to my daughter who's 29, about to be 30, and she came to me last month and she said, Mom, a guy wants to date me and he's not even planning the date. He's asking me to plan the date.
Yeah.
And she's like, how do I navigate around that? Like, do I just do it or do I encourage him by telling him the things that I like so that he can plan the date? So once again, our voices have been forced to amplify because we are raising men with the absence of men. So
Yeah.
that's the cause of the disconnect.
Yeah, it's hard. So I'm looking to see where that's going to go in the next 10 years. I brought up the fact when I wrote Single Mom in 1997, I did the research, 71% single mother households. Now I looked it up because I have a friend that, he's breaking up with his wife and he wants to do a whole movie about the disconnect. And
Mhm.
so I brought up the number, looked up the number again, 73%. You know what I mean? It's like, wow, man. It's like, and now you got some young women that date dudes, don't even want to marry the dude and stay with the dude. They want to have a kid and get
Yep.
the alimony check. And it's
Yep.
like, whoa, like what's going on? Like, you don't want the man in the family? No, I want the check and the child. The child protects me for the check. I'm like, wow. And
Yeah.
I remember when we didn't even have that term baby's mama, baby's daddy. They started that in the 90s. We had
Mhm.
men during our era, dudes just wasn't taking care of responsibility. We didn't have a word for it. Then they started, oh, this is my baby's daddy. That's my mama. Like we started word. I'm like, what the hell? In the 90s, I was in college when they started that. I'm
Yeah.
like, wow. And so now that's normal. That's my
Yeah.
baby's dad, my child's mama. You know what I mean? Instead of saying my wife, the mother of my, it's crazy. We got new words now. So
Mhm.
we gotta see where that's gonna go, man. But now I'm gonna be
Yeah.
talking about it all summer long because
Mm.
my books represent that. At the end of the book, Boss Lady, she has no children and no marriage. And
Mm.
again, when I write books, I'm not writing fantasy stuff for you to feel good about. I'm writing stuff that's strict to the culture of a journalistic perspective of what's going on. And I wasn't thinking about it then. I was in my own 30s when that book came out. I wasn't thinking about the trajectory of where black women are going to go with the whole boss lady thing. But now that I'm here, I'm like, wow. If no man qualifies now, if your daughter's like, okay, now I gotta pay for the man, that's not gonna make a woman feel like, wow, like now she has to get. Am I supposed to pay for the man now, mom? Like, because she's not used to that. Even with dude, like with me being an older dude, I'm automatically pulling my money out. I'm not used to a woman paying. So now I'm like, it's confusing. But now the younger dudes are like, hey man, women got more money. I'm asking her. I would be like, I would never ask a girl. I would ask if she want to go Dutch if it's a first date or something. But I would
Mm.
never, because I'm old. So I'm like, I don't do. But the new people, like, hey, dad, they
Yeah.
got their own money. I'm like, man, this is, so yeah, it's changing right in front of us
It's
while we're still alive.
changing.
Yeah,
Yes, and I'm trying to. I don't know if I want to adjust to it because that's just not how I was raised. Like my parents were together for over 50 years, so that's
yeah,
what I know to
yeah,
be true. So it's such a visceral reaction when now my daughter's facing these dating nuances, And I'm just like trying to give her my perspective from my reality, but that's not her reality because this era and space is so, so different.
Yeah.
So I hope that you pen a novel that is exploring the ever growing gap of disconnect between men and women because it's a real conversation.
I
Um,
actually had I started a book called Carnival, where I'm talking about Trinidad and Tobago, and I know y'all got a lot of Trinidadians up there in New York. You know, so I went to school with them at Howard, so I know the Trinidadians
yeah.
all over the
I'm,
place.
I'm,
But
I'm from St. Kitts, my dad, St. Kitts.
oh, there you go, there you go. So yeah, so I even down in D.C., Ben Bowl, Trinidadians. You know what I mean? I did articles on them. But getting back to the story, in that book Carnival, I didn't get a chance to finish it because I want to go down to Trinidad, see it, taste, get around the culture, the whole thing. So I want to go there first for my research because I don't want to do the Brazil thing with that. I want to be there. But
Uh-huh.
anyway, in that book, it's two married men who go to Trinidad for carnival. And you already know what the women go. So you and they go down there and they having problems with their wives. So the disconnect, and here's at the end of the day, you're dealing with publishers that are used to female readers. So
Mm,
immediately they were like, Omar, is this a female bashing book? So now I'm like, I'm a guy. I can't even talk about the disconnect that men have with women because you immediately like, well, what if the audience doesn't like? So now I can't even be honest about what
right.
men are going through because if
Mm,
women don't want it in the book, they gonna
mm,
reject them. But I'm like, but this is what's going on.
yeah.
We got
Yeah.
the passport boys. That's a real thing. I can't even write about it because
Yeah.
women are gonna be upset. I'm like,
Mm,
whoa. I mean, that's what culture and art is supposed to
yeah.
be. Like you
Yeah.
said, sometimes you got to be disliked. Sometimes but you got to put that stuff out there. And
Yeah.
so the editors were like, oh, we don't want you. Then they backed off and said, okay, Omar has a point. We can't start, you know, angling a book toward massaging women if this is what's going on right now. You know what I mean? So yeah, that disconnect, even in the publishing, is so female dominated that now as men, you know, I saw men when I was writing my books, I never pandered to an audience, which means I never broke the audience down or try to diminish. But I've seen other books where the guys in the book, I'm like, I don't know guys like this that are this, you know, soft or this, you
Mhm.
know, commendable to the woman. So I'm reading and I'm like, definitely this dude wanted to appeal to women with
Mm,
this male character, but that doesn't do a service to men who are real men. It's like, yo, this ain't no real, you know. So I'm reading them books like that. Like I can tell that you trying to satisfy the female audience, but you're not being honest about how real men really think and how they really
right.
get down. And so yeah,
Yeah.
it's something else when you start doing that as publishers and you say, look, you want to sell books, make your audience happy, but you making them happy with lies. You making them happy with mistruths. You're making them happy with stuff that they're going to be unprepared for later
Yeah.
on. Oh, I thought this was like something. No, I got to give you so the truth hurts, man. Like Sister
Yeah.
Soldier said, if the truth hurts, you'll be in pain. If the truth
Mm,
drives you crazy, you'll be insane. We are
mm,
at war. But the lot of
yes.
kids, they haven't heard Sister Soldier speak, so they don't have any idea of how militant and how old school she is with what
Yeah.
she stands ground on. But yeah,
Yeah.
that Sister Soldier says, she said it all the time, dude. If the truth hurts, you'll be in pain. But right
Yeah.
now, a whole lot of people cannot take the truth. It's all about buttering up your audience and making more money off your audience instead of telling them what it is. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
these books are bringing back the truth because I
Mm,
was telling the truth when I was a young kid, just writing
yeah.
it the way it was, naturalistic books. And so now you got the trilogy coming back where I have to talk about the evolution and the elevation of the Black woman because that's what the series does. That's what it does.
Well, I'm going to keep praying that you get a seat at that table to be a decision maker because we want the truth from the male perspective. There is an audience for that. Most recently, I was having a conversation with Jay Alexander. He is one of the co-founders of Fubu, and he is now the founder of the For Us By Us network. And some of the content on there, it's a little salacious for me, and it is offering the woman's perspective. And I challenged him. I also want to see the male perspective. I
Yeah.
want to know the nuances behind the way that you think, because that's how we're going to,
Right.
kind of lower the gap. We need to understand one another. We just can't have
Right.
one version
Right.
of the story. So
Right.
your seat at the table, Omar, it's waiting. So please do us proud once you occupy. that scene.
Yeah, and then I got to keep my emotions in check and be very analytical and logical about it, because you can get emotional in those type of discussions. But that's what I've been telling sisters, for the last couple of years. I'm gonna keep saying it. Men have a tendency to protect what they want. What do I mean by that? Since you were a little boy, the older guys would tell you, do not tell that girl that. She's not going to give you none. You tell her this. I'm telling you, like, you are everybody, every man listening from New York to LA, from Houston to Detroit. We've been through that with the older brothers. Do not tell that girl that. She is not going to give you. So we learn how to lie to women all the time. And then you get to be a grown husband. And I'm
Mhm.
around grown husbands right now. And they'll say, "Oh, Omar, you're not going to change women. You know how it is." So they all have complaints, but they like, dude, that's just the way it is. And what, you're not going to change that. So a
Mhm.
lot of men, even though they don't like it, they don't talk about it. Now, with
Right.
the younger dudes, here's the deal. I'm talking about married older men in their 50s and 60s. When you talk to these younger dudes in their 30s, they're not married yet, and they still are apathetic about where they're going with young women, and they're doing stuff like this. Well, when she don't like me no more, I just speed on. I just slide. I'm gonna get ghost. That's the new word, ghost. Right? I'm gonna get ghost. And I'm
Yeah.
telling women, like, if that dude has a plan to get ghost, and you walking around like everything is great and whatnot, and he's not expressing his real emotions about what he don't like, when he gets ghost, you got no idea why. You got it,
Mhm.
and you sitting there like, well, why did my man leave? Wow, you didn't have any conversation. And that's what I'm trying to get sisters with. You cannot have a silent man who
Mm.
doesn't like what you're doing, but won't say anything about it. Then he
Yeah.
goes to the barbershop and tells them everything, blow by blow, but you don't know any of it. That is a problem. And I'm
Yeah.
telling you now, and that's why I'm going to keep bringing Sister Soldier up. If the truth hurts, you're going to be, because we got to get back to that truth. Because if
Yeah.
you got men who are not saying what the truth is, and they looking at that clock and saying, all right, when I'm done with this, I'm just going to move on to my other girl, a whole lot of women are going to be left holding the bag. And I'm
Yeah.
trying to get them prepared. You got to have that tough conversation so you know
Mhm.
where you're going with that man.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And it won't be easy at first. I'm going through a situation where at first communication was non existent, but now the individual or my person is better understanding that communication is allowing us to grow, to
Yeah.
learn more about each other so that we aren't, let me disappear for 5 minutes or 5 days or 5 months because I just don't want
Yeah.
to do this
I don't
anymore.
know what it is. What you disappearing for? Oh, I
Right.
just needed some space to myself. Why? Oh, I don't want to talk about it. You gotta talk about it.
Yeah, you got to talk about it.
I'm tired of hearing that. I don't want to talk
Yeah,
about it. You have to talk about it.
you
We're
do.
grown adults. You can't keep thinking somebody's going to guess what you mean. Well, he should know what I want. Well, he should know what I mean. Well, he should know what he need to do. No. You
Yeah.
gotta talk, man. You gotta say something. So that part
Hmm.
there is driving me nuts. He should know that already. Well, you a
No,
man, you should know. Well, you
you
should
don't
know
know.
this and that.
You don't know. You got to tell them. You
Yeah,
got to tell them. I am an unapologetic truth teller. I am bold in what I say. I mean what I say. I'm straight, no filter. That's just the cloth that I was cut from because I'm a Brooklyn girl born and raised,
right,
so there's
right,
nothing else to me. So, are there any final thoughts that you
right.
would like to convey to my audience before we close out this amazing conversation?
Well, it's going to be a fun time. It's like now you got the social media generation where everything happens and doesn't happen on social media, but we were here before social media.
Yep.
So you got to go back to the physical events, beating the bush for the people, getting them talking. And I'm going to keep talking about the elevation of the black woman because I
Mm,
happen to have written that series. And whether I was thinking about it at the time or not, I did it. It's coming back out. I'm a grown man now that's going through my own issues of watching what's going on with it. I'm concerned about it and I'm going to keep talking about it. So I'm going to be, nice and poised and logical, but we're going to keep talking about the disconnect that we have right now because it's getting steeper for your daughter and for my sons. It's getting steeper when I hear young guys saying, well, when I'm done with it, I'm just going to walk away. Think about that. When I'm done, you got marrieds and kids, but when I'm done, I'm just going to walk away. Like I wasn't raised that way, man. Like what the hell
Yeah.
is going on? But if that's the thing, when women like, well, I'm just gonna take my kids and he gonna pay for it. It's just like nothing. Like y'all didn't go to the altar and say, for rich or for poor, for but
Right.
we heard that, but we ain't sticking to that. So
Right.
it's dangerous. So yeah, I'm gonna
It's
keep
dangerous.
talking about it. I'm gonna
Me
keep talking
too.
about it
But
because we
something else
we
that you
need to have
mentioned too,
families. Yeah, go
on
ahead.
the male side, I'll talk about the females too, because even though I'm female, there's some nuances that we need to address as well. Even in this space and era, you have more females saying, "No, I don't want to get married. I just rather
Yeah,
have his baby." I'm like,
yeah,
"What?
yeah,
You don't
yeah.
even have aspirations to be a wife anymore. You just want to have a child, and that's it."
The faith, the confidence and faith in the black man, you know what I mean? And you said it, if too many people are being raised without a man, then in their minds, what is a man? What's the man to do? And if I'm doing all this stuff without a man, then I'm gonna keep doing it without a man. What
Yeah,
I need a man for? And so
yeah,
yeah, it got to that point where it's like I don't need no man. I'm gonna keep doing. So a man becomes a contemporary thing, not a long-standing family thing, but a contemporary thing of what I want right now. And boy, that's a hard world to live in. But that's what we're
yeah.
looking at.
It is. My father, he's in his 70s. And although he's an older man, I often too have to remind him, I still need you to be intentional in how you move and what you say in front of your granddaughter, my daughter. Like it is an ongoing responsibility. We have to hold each other accountable, men and women. We have to communicate what we need, how we want to be represented, how we want to be treated, how we want to be loved. And it's all going to be successful if you're willing to have these open conversations. So even though he's my father, and although he's raised me and he is an amazing man, I still give myself full permission to look at my father and say, okay, can we kind of do this a little bit differently? Because I still have my daughter watching.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that she's getting the right examples. So be unafraid to have these conversations, no matter who it is with, because I think that we owe it to ourselves, because this disconnect can't grow any wider. I don't want it to.
Well, I'm glad that she gets a chance to see her grandfather and talk to her grandfather. You know what I mean? Because that's the thing again, where we had I was around my grandfather. So my sisters were around. You know what I mean? I got two sisters on my father's side. So when you get around older people, you know how they are, you know how they act. So I don't feel pressure around older people at all. I did it quickly. I did an interview with what's his name is the football player Mike Singletary, big
Okay.
time football player, old
Uh-huh.
school Chicago Bears. And he's
Uh-huh.
the kind of man, old school, where they got that rough kind. But I was raised that way. So I talked to him like he's my uncle. Like, yeah, there's nothing. And they like, man, you talk to Mike Singletary like that? I'm like, yeah, I had uncles, I had coaches like that, so I'm used to it. So I wasn't afraid of them,
Right.
because I had a 6'4", 230-pound monster in the house who would knock on people's doors and say, excuse me, you parked your car in my spot. I would like if
Right.
you came outside and moved it. And then with no gun. I'm like, this dude is crazy. But I came up with that, so I will do the same thing if I need to, because I'm used to it. So, a
Right.
lot of people, they're not used to that. They get intimidated. But it's like, yo, dude, I couldn't. I had to grumble every day. I had to come home to this dude this big. So after a while, you get used to it. Like, look, I got to stand up. I got to stand up. So even though I'm only 6 foot, 160 something, I still have that thought now that I'm this bigger, just because I was raised by that. So that's how I'm thinking, like the Napoleon kind. Now, of course, I'm not short, but I'm not 6'4",
Right.
But yeah, man, you get raised a different way. And so a lot of people like, well, Omar, how come you come off like that? You can't see who I was raised by. You see what I'm
Right.
talking about? You just see
Right.
me, but I had to deal with that every single day of my life. And so as they say, iron sharp as iron. I didn't
Mhm.
have it. I'm iron and I didn't have a choice. I'm sorry. I got to apologize to y'all. But that's how I survived this dude every day.
Wow.
you
And
know?
survive you did, and thrive you are doing. Omar, once again, I am so proud of you. I
Thank
am
you.
so happy that you decided to
Brooklyn.
bless my platform. This was a great conversation, and I wish you nothing but continued success. Where can they pick up this reimagined, same legendary story, but all new look of a trilogy? Where can they pick up your books? For the
We
Love of
start
Money, Flyy
we
Girl, and Boss Lady. Where can they pick it up?
we started promoting it early, but it's really going to hit the market May the 6th because they still doing the cover design, still put. So I had to stop promoting it. Now I'm promoting the Flyy Girl brand gear. So we got Flyy Girl clothing coming. We got cell phone. We got perfume. That's the biggest. Slippers. Everything Flyy Girl, because now I have to make it more than just a book. You got to make it a whole movement, make it
Yes.
international. And so I'm
Yes.
doing that now. But the books will be back out with all the links and all the pre-orders May the 6th. And then, of course, my summer tour starts in June. And I'm still trying to book something at the Schomburg Center in Harlem. And it's hard, man. You're trying to get a New York thing. It's hard. So I'm still trying to book that. And then y'all got the Boys and Girls Brooklyn High School that y'all do that event in the summer. I might come back there and do that. But yeah, all summer long, I'll be pushing the book.
They
It
moved
goes on
that.
sale. Yeah.
They moved that from Boys and Girls High
They moved
School.
that. Yeah, they
Yeah, they
moved
moved that. It's downtown Brooklyn. It's been here for a few years now, but now they're talking about relocating the
again.
fair. Well, yeah, so be on the lookout because there may be a new location this summer. But I'm definitely going to order my Flyy Girl gear because I'm headed to
New
Aruba
covers.
in
Yeah.
2 weeks, and I gotta represent the Flyy Girl movement all the way in
And
Aruba. And
y'all started it because the Brooklyn Boogie Boys from Brooklyn started that
yep,
song. So we
yep,
stole the song from y'all. And then
yep.
I added the extra Y. So when you see Fly with two
Ah,
Y's, I did that. Everybody else spells with one Y, including the Boogie Boys. I added the extra Y because that's how we say it. Fly. We hover it. Yeah. And nobody says fly. Nobody says that. Fly. You know what I mean? And so yeah, I added that extra Y for the four Flyy Girl. 4 and 4 makes 8. You know, real Simmons metric like Boss Lady. And yeah, it's gonna be coming back out, and we're gonna be talking about the elevation and the
mm.
elevation of the black woman.
Nice, nice. I'm going to stay tuned into this conversation because I'm interested in, just hearing about the elevation and the evolution of the
Yeah,
Black woman and the disconnect, so
yeah.
that we can kind of re-engage. But once again, thank you so much, Omar. Where can my audience follow you? Are you on social media?
Yeah, I'm at only one, the number one, Omar Tyree on Instagram, and then TikTok is Omar Tyree, Facebook is Omar Tyree, LinkedIn is Omar Tyree, and X is Omar Tyree. So and then I got Flyy Girl Fridays on Instagram where I'm starting a whole store. Every Friday we release a new Flyy Girl product. We got the first T-shirts on there. Next week we're doing the hoodies, and so I'm going all out, and we're gonna show everybody the stuff first. Then we're gonna open up the store in April, and we're gonna have it moving. So I'm gonna have a lot of sisters that's designing clothes and running the company. And so sisters again are in position because I don't wear the clothes, so I gotta listen to the sisters. That Omar this color, Omar this curve, Omar. I'm like cool. So I'm gonna
Yeah.
have a whole bunch of sisters in business, boss
Yes.
ladies that I'm working
Yes.
with.
Yes. I like the pink and I believe it was the yellow one. So I'll be
Yeah, yeah,
copying that like
yellow
real soon.
linen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'm a part of the movement. I'm a Fly Girl too. But
Cool.
Omar, once again, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'm going to continue on with this episode, but like I said, it has been a blessing and it is already written. It is already ordained. You already have your seat at that table and you will continue on with this movement and we will be there cheering you on. We're just waiting for it to happen, but it's already happening right now.
Thank you. You got it. Thanks for having me. And let's do a follow up in the
Sure.
fall. After the whole tour is over, we can do a
Yes.
follow up in the fall, like September or October.
I'm here. Just tell me when and we'll make it happen. Thank you so much. Okay. I'll talk to you
Thank
soon.
you. You got it.
Bye bye. Yes. So there you have it. Omar Tyree, best-selling author. That was an amazing conversation. He really just talked about his life trajectory, the journey of his life, the pivotal moments, who shaped him. Um, this is something that a lot of people don't understand. You see these adults, and then you're like, who they think they are? Who does he think he is? Who does she think she is? It's the audacity of how we were raised. It is the audacity in how we were raised. So when you see excellence step in the room, and I'm talking to us, I'm talking to my people. When you see excellence step in the room, we have to stop leading with our trauma and automatically finding something wrong with it instead of celebrating it. We have to align ourselves with greatness. Omar mentioned that in his series of for his series of Flyy Girl, Boss Lady, people wanted the main character, they wanted her to wait. Although she was a college student and she became a celebrity and her boyfriend was incarcerated, they expected her to wait 8-9 years for him to get out of jail. Why? Why always got to be the prison bae? Why do Black women always have to be the prison bae? I don't get it. I don't get it. We have to stop living in trauma. And if we don't acknowledge that, once again, the disconnect, the gap will continue to grow. So make sure that you align yourself with this movement, the Flyy Girl movement, because there are so many fly girls out there like myself. And he's an author that deserves it. I'm telling you, I'm so true when I say that I am praying for him to get a seat at the table. It's already written. It's already happening. And I'm excited to see what Omar is going to do once he signs the contract accepting that position. And he's able to make a film out of Flyy Girl. Who doesn't want to see the Flyy Girl film? I do. I'm waiting for it. So once again, an amazing conversation. Listen to this conversation over and over again. Make sure you share this conversation with your family, your friends, people that you know could benefit from this, people who you know aspire to be an author, people who you know who are current authors. This was a information-filled conversation. Make sure you also support the Sanya on Air sponsor. Go to the link in the description section of this episode and get your shop on, Black-owned business. Once again, we're living in a space where we need to elevate. We need to acknowledge. We need to celebrate. We need to protect Black-owned. It is so super important. So do me a favor. I just have one request. Even if it's once a month, support a Black-owned business. It could be a podcaster, share their episode. It could be a store. Buy something for yourself or for a friend. But support. This is Sanya on Air. So this has been another amazing edition of Sanya on Air. I have a lot to think about. After every conversation on Sanya on Air, I walk away and I just think. I just think about what was communicated, what was said, what was learned, what needs to be unpacked, and I implore you to do the same. Are you ready? So stay tuned for another amazing episode of Sanya on Air, where I unpack celebrity pivotal conversations, celebrity pivotal moments and milestones, while also providing you pipelines to access. Take care, my loves. Smooches. Bye-bye.